Good morning from the campus of the United States Sports Academy, and this is Sports Talk. I'm Dr. Arthur Ogden, Chair of Sports Management at the Academy, and each week at this time, Wednesday morning, 11:30 Central Time, the faculty and I engage in a number of contemporary and appropriate sport issues. The panel today consisting of Dr. Steve Butler to my left, who is the Dean of Academic Affairs, and Dr. Fred Camardi to my right, who is our Director of Doctoral Studies. And we will engage in an overall topic: is there a Division III in the NCAA's future? We've heard an awful lot about that. And we've heard a number of conference commissioners, namely Mike Slive, the commissioner of the SEC conference, talking about what the Big Five, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the Pac-12 would do in terms of a certain degree of autonomy. We'll get onto that. But what will become of the NCAA if the Big Five conferences actually do go their own way? By way of background, we'd have to say that today the NCAA is facing greater problems than it ever has since its inception in 1906, when President Theodore Roosevelt summoned the college presidents to the White House to discuss the state of collegiate athletics. The issues today, though, are a little bit different. Back then, it was purely safety and organizational. Today, the NCAA faces questions of antitrust, questions of endorsement deals for college students, and even of freshman eligibility. The traditional model for the NCAA is based on a concept of amateurism, but as we have seen over the last 15 years, that concept has had somewhat of a fluid application. In some instances, it's all right, and in some instances, it's not all right to get some type of endorsements or to play and receive money in some other sports. The Jeremy Bloom case, for those of you who remember, is just such an instance. Now, these Big Five conferences are petitioning the NCAA Division I Board of Directors to vote on an autonomy measure which would give them greater self-direction and greater self-regulation. That vote is scheduled for August 5th, which is not too far away. But the real threat is if that autonomy is not granted by the NCAA's Division I Board of Directors. And to this, Mike Slive said at the SEC Media Days just this week, the 14th of July to be exact, quote, "As I have said before, if we do not achieve a positive outcome under the existing Big Tent of Division I, we will need to consider the establishment of a venue with similar conferences and institutions where we can enact the desired changes in the best interest of our student athletes," quotes closed. That sets the tone and the tenor and sets the backdrop of what we want to talk about today. Should this happen, the NCAA will no longer be the NCAA that we have come to know for the past half century plus. In the aftermath of that possibility, there are going to be a number of questions which will emerge, and these questions we will engage today. First, Dr. Camardi, do you believe the new model for this association, or Division IV, would follow the template which has served the NCAA's member institutions for more than 70 years, or is it going to be something different?
It's going to be something completely different. If you pay attention to what Commissioner Slive was saying, it's basically the Big Five now realize that there's still a heck of a lot of money still out there. And it's about the money. That's exactly what it's about. It's the only thing that it's about. And they're trying to position themselves where they can continue to garner as much revenue as they possibly can. Now, they threw in the caveat there in his conversation about, well, you know, maybe there will be consideration for some type of stipend or paying the true cost of an education for a student athlete, all of the student athletes. Well, okay, in the grand scheme of things, with all of the money that is potentially available, and that's available in the pot right now, it's still going to garner those individuals that are part of that Division IV a whole heck of a lot of money.
And if this separation does occur, I'll ask the dean here, I have a sneaky suspicion because the NCAA is so packed with lawyers, and if you take a look at the NCAA manual, it's written by lawyers for lawyers. As a matter of fact, their enforcement agents are largely comprised of ex-FBI agents. Do you think it's possible that if these major conferences actually do go through with a total secession from the NCAA, that somehow or other these attorneys will find some little codicil and try to charge them a separation fee or sue them in some fashion so that it will try to hurt them or gain money back for the NCAA?
I think they might try, but I'm not sure how successful they would be. We've seen in the last couple of weeks how inept the NCAA appears to be in presenting their position in a court of law. I think that to follow on with what Dr. Cromartie said, I think that if they do break away, they almost have to have a model that's completely different from the NCAA, because one of the reasons why they would be breaking away because the NCAA model has failed so miserably. And you know, the thousands of people out there who watch this show every week will know that I'm not a big fan of the NCAA, and I think that as you pointed out, and as Dr. Cromartie pointed out, the Big Five conference commissioners, and Mike Slive in particular, will always say it's done for the benefit of the student athlete. The NCAA will say the same thing. The real reason why the NCAA doesn't want them to break away has nothing to do with the student athletes. It has to do with money,
right,
just like Dr. Cromartie said.
Exactly.
And the Big Five conferences, their philosophy is, why should we share with the Monmouth States and the Trinities of the world when we're the ones that are making all the money, spending all the money, and those kinds of things. I personally think that the Division IV model works for football. I'm not sure it works for gymnastics or tennis or track and field, but we'll see.
But that's part of the problem, though, is because we really don't have a true template for which they are trying to present to identify how it might work for all of those entities that would be involved in the process.
Right.
Now let's go back.
This would be something that really, and I know that's important. But if you let's take a look at this though. You both mentioned the money and what it boils down to. Two primary instances. The television contracts for football is owned by the BCS or the College Football Association or whatever it's called. But March Madness, the NCAA basketball tournament, is owned by the NCAA. Let's talk about what happens when they. And I was going to get to that. That's where the legal wrangling is going to occur, because as it stands right now, the NCAA owns the rights to March Madness and the NCAA tournament. For men's and women's.
Men's and women's, that's correct. Okay, so if these five, conferences want to split off, I think that's going to be a division once again where it's going to be football and it's going to be basketball. We already know that in the grand scheme of things right now, the NCAA garners very little monies off of football. Okay, the institutions themselves garner a great deal of money off of it. The bowls are different because the NCAA has no control over that. But
that money, the football money, just to add to what you're saying, football money is distributed by conference.
Yes.
It goes to the conference, and the conference is split it up.
Exactly. But in terms of the big pot, basketball rivals football to some degree because it garners a whole heck of a lot of money.
Billions.
And the NCAA is just not going to, say, okay, you've challenged us, and now we don't have any legs to stand on. They've got some legs to stand on. They're going to stand on.
Yeah, but how quickly would CBS say that the NCAA had broken their end of the contract and bail on the NCAA if the Big Five or the Division IV, whatever you want to call them, say, okay, you guys own the NCAA tournament, we're going to have our big our Division IV basketball tournament.
Well, and they very well could, because that's going to bring in their legalese, legal eagles as well. But the bottom line is, let's look at it this way. These are member institutions, okay? These conferences, their individual schools have agreed and pay to be members of the NCAA. So their membership currently is intact, okay? And that presents another hurdle. You've got they're going to have to look at all of the ways that they can gradually move away. Mike Clive has got a great argument here. He's got a big piece of the pie in terms of the money itself. That speaks volumes. But the simple fact of the matter is that some of the minute details are the ones that are going to trip them all up.
I could be wrong, and Dr. Ogden's the expert in this, but isn't NCAA membership voluntary?
Yes, it is. It's voluntary, and they pay a fee.
Yeah.
Now they could be members of the NCAA, or they could be members of the NAIA, which is actually an older athletic association, the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, based in Kansas City. And they were the ones who had the very first basketball tournament, national basketball tournament. And then there is the NCCAA, the National Christian College Athletic Association, which operates a little bit differently. But those are the three major. All of them are voluntary organizations, and as a consequence, that makes it a little bit different. But the binding nature of the conferences is what is stronger, much stronger, because the affiliations through the conferences have allowed televisions to make better contracts for football, which is where the money is, on a school-by-school basis, with the conferences. That's why how much was distributed last month down at the annual meeting of the SEC in Destin.
The most ever.
Yeah.
$118 or $19 million per school.
To each school. Even if their school didn't win a game, they're still going to earn
if you look at the conference realignments that have happened in the last 5 years, and there's been a lot of them, there's no secret to why the SEC let Texas A&M and Missouri in. That brought us Texas and Missouri
for recruiting purposes.
There's no and money purposes too. There's no secret why the Big Ten let Rutgers in. Mm-hmm. That brings in the New York City market.
Oh yeah. And much bigger market.
Again, it leads all the way back to the money. There's no secret either that the SEC network is getting ready to start August 14th.
Yeah,
so that rivals a Longhorn network, that rivals Big Ten, that rivals all of these. All of these conferences are setting all of the pieces in place to where they have their share, and that's exactly what they want, their share, and they'll go after as much as they possibly can to reach into other markets. And right now, we know in terms of conference coverage from a football perspective, the SEC is looked at nationwide.
Let me throw a bunch of shotgun ideas out at you, because I know we're short on ideas. What becomes of the notion of amateurism? What becomes of the notion of student athlete, which is that manufactured phrase thought up by Walter Byers to protect the NCAA from an insurance policy suit? What happens to graduation rates? I mean, are we going to pay attention to graduation rates? And if this new autonomy, or if the Division IV comes about, will athletic standards be mitigated for athletic talent? That's a toss-up, guys. Go at it. Say what you want to.
I think money is driving this. But I think there is a piece of what's going on with the Big Five conferences that have said the NCAA has failed horribly in all these areas. We can do it better, and I think we don't need to be completely cynical that the interests of the student athletes are not part of the puzzle. They definitely wouldn't be more important than the money piece. But I think we need to wait and see on that one, because, like I said, the NCAA has certainly done nothing to protect the student athletes. Maybe the Big Five conferences will. I called in on a talk radio show about 5 years ago, and the subject was about conference realignment. And at that time, I thought that by now there'd be 4 conferences.
Right.
with like
Four super conferences.
four super conferences. So I missed by one. But you know, I think that as we go forward, the idea, you know, you talk about freshman eligibility. When I was a kid, freshmen couldn't play in college. You had freshman teams, and they played other freshman teams. They couldn't play varsity. Yeah, we all know that the best basketball team in the country in the 66-67 season was the UCLA freshman team. But Lou Alcindor and them boys couldn't play varsity. They beat the first game ever in Pauley Pavilion. They beat the varsity by 28 points. The defending national champs. So all those things are you know, you brought up the idea of amateurism. I find it hard to watch a Clemson football game on TV a few years ago with Kyle Parker as the quarterback. I find it hard to view him as an amateur athlete when he signed $1 million signing bonus with the Colorado Rockies and plays minor league baseball in the summer, and then goes back to school and is labeled an amateur. You know, what really is an amateur? I think the Olympic model is a good one. I think that, you know, you brought up the what was the skier's name? You brought up
Jeremy Bloom.
You know, how is his case different than Kyle Parker's case?
Right.
You know, he's making money playing baseball, but he's an amateur when it comes to football. That kind of fails the common sense test in my mind.
Once again, those are applications that go back to the NCAA itself. So, and I agree, the NCAA has failed. But again, we have leadership committees within the NCAA structure in that. So these very representatives from each of these individual schools have failed miserably as well. Let's not just blame it on the bureaucracy of the NCAA. These are individuals that represent the institutional members that are not collectively coming together to address the issue. We talked about the baseball player. He was able to do that because baseball allows for that provision, but football doesn't. So why is there not a universal provision to say, hey, if a kid goes out and makes money in a different area, why does that take into account and say his amateur status is no longer there? Because from my perspective, the amateur status has been gone a long time ago.
Right.
Long time ago.
And it is, there are those who present a very, very cynical view that amateurism really is a function of the upper class in Europe, namely Britain. It really did not want to associate with the working class in athletic competition. So because the elites did not have to work for their money anyway, they played for the love of the game and were therefore amateurs. But the blue-collar workers who actually were playing to get some money, somehow or other, it demeaned the whole thing. So it was a whole socioeconomic a prejudicial issue. As you can see, folks, this whole issue kicks over a can of worms which perhaps is going to cost us a great deal in terms of what we value, and how we view athletics, not on the collegiate level, but perhaps on every other level as well. I want to thank you for joining us, and as usual, we've gone over a little bit. We apologize for that, for those of you who are on a tight time schedule, but thank you for joining us, and thank you for the many emails you've been sending in regarding Sports Talk. If you have some more suggestions, please send them to sportstalk@usssa.edu. And so, for Dr. Butler and Dr. Cromartie, I'm Arthur Ogden saying, have a great day in sports, and God bless.